your second host, Kinsey, today. Some of you may have seen in the Facebook group, but Kinsey is taking a much earned vacation and she's trying her best to actually do that. So I'm flying solo tonight, and there's no one who I would rather have here with me. I guess I'm not really flying solo. I'm the co-pilot still. But no one I'd rather be solo hosting with than our guest, Ema Klugman. And you know her, of course, as a Ride IQ coach and as somebody that I'm sure your eyes just get stars in them when you get to watch her compete. But Ema has been a Ride IQ coach from the beginning. She's, of course, a 5-star event rider. She was the highest placed young rider at Land Rover, Kentucky in 2021 on Bendigo. And I believe a Ride IQ member, or at least a former Ride IQ member, now rides Ben, which is pretty special too. I got to meet her at Kentucky a couple years ago. Ema's also on the Australian High Performance Next squad, which identifies upcoming Olympians and world championship riders. She's a 3-time A Pony Club member, something I didn't know was possible until I met Ema. She's one of 2 people, I think, to do that in North America. Just an all around absolutely incredible person. It's something that I want to get into, just like these, and the incredible person part of it too is not even to do with these huge like accomplishments and milestones that she's had. She's just genuinely, to her core, such an incredible person as well. So we feel incredibly fortunate to know her and have her be part of Ride IQ. And today we're doing a general Ask Me Anything. So anything goes. We have some great questions lined up already, but if you're here live, please please say hi in the chat. We love to know that you're here. And then as the questions come to you, put them in chat and we'll make sure to address them. So with that, Ema, we're so grateful to you. Thank you for taking the time to do this AMA with us.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the very nice introduction. I'm excited, and I'm a little bit interested in what can come through the questions here, because we're going rogue. No predetermined topic.
It's a brave thing to do, I think. So thank you for being up for it. And I'm getting my intro for you down a bit because I get to see you. It feels like every day. We just did an event together yesterday. You did an event for Pony Club members to help them study for their upcoming HB certifications. You did that last Monday as well. And I don't even think I said it in my introduction, but you're also in law school at George Washington University. So you have a few things on your plate. And I know a couple of questions that came through are just like, how? So we'll get to those questions too. We just had someone say hi on Facebook. They said, hi, Ema, I love your horses. So maybe that's a good lead in. Will you tell us where you are and what horses are in your regular riding program right now?
Sure. Yep. So I actually live in Northern Virginia, but my horses live at my mother's property in Clarksburg, Maryland, which is kind of close to Frederick, just a bit north of Washington, D.C. And we have, I think, 9 horses on the property at the moment. We basically kind of keep the program small. We've got a couple of semi-retired, the old boys, we call them, who are Bendigo, and a horse called Joker's Win, who each took me around lots of my first advanced level events. And then I guess going from sort of the top of the feed chart down, if you will, we have a horse called Bronte Beach, who I've had since she was 5, who's now, I think, 11 this year, who's done several 4-stars and is hopefully stepping up to 5-star soon. A horse called RF Redfern, who I've had, I think, 3 years, who stepped up to 4-star this year and is a really cool, small in stature but large in character mare. We've got a lot of mares right now, actually. I have a horse called Sleeve Callan Alpha, who is a big gray Irish gelding, so he doesn't really fit in with the whole bay mare vibe that we have. He's owned by a guy named Nicholas Cardamone, who lives in Atlanta and very graciously kind of has allowed me to ride the horse. And he is stepping up to 3-star level. He's a 10-year-old, and he's a lovely big horse, big scopy horse. So I enjoy riding him. And then we get to sort of the younger ones. So I have a horse called Brooklyn, who also Nicholas owns, who does some show jumping. Horse called FVF Wildflower, who's a 6-year-old, done a few preliminary events and is quite a fun little horse as well. And then let's see, we have a new 4-year-old who we're actually open to naming suggestions. So if any Ride IQers want to, get the naming rights for this horse, maybe we should have a little contest. But her name, we've been calling her Melon, and she came over from Europe about a month ago. She just came out of quarantine, so actually just jumped a couple of jumps on her today for the first time, which was very fun. But she's a real, green bean, and so we're just gonna teach her about eventing. And then we've got a 3-year-old as well. So we've got the 3-year-old's named Woody, or Woods Hole, and he's a off the track thoroughbred. But he's a lovely, lovely big gray gelding, and so we're excited about him. So we literally have the range,
Totally.
3 years old to 21 years old, which is how old Ben is. So,
Wow. I am
range.
so excited about this naming opportunity too. You're probably going to regret saying it, but maybe after this, you could share a photo of currently Melon in the Facebook group and we could get some ideas rolling and we'll see where it goes. And I remember too, maybe it's not something we can talk about live. I don't know why, but when you introduced Woods Hole, I was like, does it have anything to do with Woods Hole, Massachusetts or not?
Yeah. So my partner grew up going to basically a like little island off the coast there, and her family would go like on the ferry from Woods Hole. So anyway, we bought the horse kind of together / she's a vet, so she like looks at all the videos and makes sure the horses are sound, etc. And so she was really excited about him, and she's done a lot of the work with him, and so I let her name him. Yeah,
that's amazing. When I saw it, I loved that name. One of the podcasts I listened to is a storytelling podcast called The Moth, and they always say from Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And so
really?
Woods Hole, I was like, rings a bell.
Yeah.
But it really is incredible, the spectrum of horses you have right now. You have the 2 grays. Are the rest of them bay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it's very easy to mix them up. Yeah.
And one thing that I find really it's just a different level of involvement. So I guess really impressive is like Ben was a horse that you developed yourself as you guys started together as a kid. How old were you and how old was Ben when you guys met?
I was 14 and he was 11.
And then
so he was actually pretty old to like start his eventing career. Yeah.
Totally. And then went to the 5-star level and had success, and just like both of you just seemed like you were in the right place with the right partner, and it was so cool to watch. But developing these horses from a young age is such a journey that you can kind of like pull back the curtain on, and not many people can. With that, I guess, tell us about, and you're in law school right now, so tell us about, with your current program, what does it look like? Like, is your mom doing the conditioning rides on the horses, or are you splitting up the work with others so that you can kind of try to do your law school and your riding, or how are you managing it at the moment?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say at this very moment, I'm actually in a pretty rare, like month-long period of not being in school or working like at a, in a legal job. And so I actually have way more time than I usually do to ride. Usually I'm like trying to ride all like 3 or 4 horses before like 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I jump in the shower, then jump in the car, drive into DC, do a bunch of stuff. And then, sometimes then do the opposite in the evenings. But like right now, it's kind of nice. I, can sleep in a little, which I very rarely do. And I kind of have all day to ride the horses, which is really nice. So I don't feel rushed as much. But I guess in a nutshell, the way I manage it with having, this, I think of it kind of like a pyramid, right? Like you want to have a few kind of younger ones at the bottom, and then inevitably not all of them are going to make it to the top level. Not all of them are kind of cut out for top level eventing, even if they seem like the most amazing prospect when they're young, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe they just don't want to do it. Maybe their body doesn't hold up to it. Maybe, um, you know, there can be extenuating circumstances, right? So it's rare that like the ones that you kind of start out with when they're young are going to make it to the top level. And so you kind of have to, in my view, in order to have some like consistency at the top level, the way I think of it is you just have to have this sort of pipeline coming through at all times if you can. And so to that, I got a little bit sidetracked. Is the idea that basically at any one time I'm kind of focusing on like 2 to 3 horses, especially like when I'm in school. And so that means that like that the horses in those like slots that I'm like focusing on the most kind of change over the course of the year. So like in the spring leading up to the big 3 day events, those are like the upper level horses. But then like over the summer, when some of them are like on a little bit of a break, then the young horses go in those slots. And then in the fall, again, like maybe the young ones get a break, but then the upper level ones do it again. And like there's always stuff that goes wrong, like the horse has an abscess. So I'm like, okay, well, that one can't be ridden. Like I'll, spend a week with the babies, teaching them, how to go in the water that's, the river down the street or whatever. Like just try to make the best use of time when you can. But for sure, I have help. So I'm not doing this all on my own. As you mentioned, my mom rides quite a bit. She does like a lot of conditioning, trail riding, hacking. Of all the horses. I mean, she did that with Bendigo. She does it with Bronte now, with Fern. And so they all, they all take good care of her, but she also can, trot for an hour on them if if those are the orders kind of thing. And my partner rides them as well, mostly on the weekends because she's a resident right now.
Oh my gosh.
Veterinary surgical residency, so her hours are pretty insane. And then I also have, the odd kind of either working student or just friend who wants to come and ride. And like, I'm very open to people in the area just because I know my horses that they're like pretty safe and they're used to packing out and to doing trot sets and stuff. Like, I'm pretty happy for people that I know can ride reasonably well. They can hop on Oakley or whoever and we just go and do a bit of a trot together, a bit of a canter. So yeah, it's kind of piecemeal, but generally we make it work. Sometimes I feel like I'm not, giving every horse exactly all it deserves. And if I was doing this solely full time, I could be, really make sure that every horse got exactly what it needed. But I think we do a pretty good job of kind of taking good care of them and trying to make sure they're as prepared as they can be for the big shows.
Totally. And I think that's such a relatable feeling of, I mean, in horses, but also in life. Like you want to show up 100% for everyone and everything that you care about for their sake. And also like with the horses, it's like for their sake and for the goals that you have individually and together. Have you learned anything over the years that helps you like have peace with that feeling?
Not really. Like sometimes I lose sleep over it in
Yeah.
the middle of the night, right? Like just thinking about "Ooh, what you could have done differently, or like this horse isn't going as well as I want it to, like what, can be changed. But it can also be as simple as like, you look at your watch and you literally have to get off the horse in 10 minutes because you have to get to class or you have to get to work and you're like, shoot, I can't do a bloody walk, canter, walk transition today, right? Or whatever it may
Mhm.
be. And so it can be frustrating. I mean, I think in some ways it can make you be like more focused on what you're doing if you feel like, okay, I have a finite amount of like time. It's kind of like when you go and like run through your dressage tests when you just like do stuff at home, you often take the liberty of like, oh, I'm just going to do an extra circle here to like make sure my horse is ready for the transition and then I'll do it. Whereas when you run through the test, you like have to do everything on the marker, right? And so it's a little bit analogous to that in the sense that like, okay, you've got, 35 minutes to kind of do a really good flat work school on the horse. I try to like really plan those out in advance, even if it's as simple as like when I swing my leg over the horse and I hack to the field where I ride or to the arena, like I like just think about, okay, I'm going to do like, 10 minutes of this. I'm going to try to hit these leg yields, do a little bit of shoulder for and this, whatever. And then I'll like do some counter canter. And then, sometimes I change my plan based on how the horse feels, but like have a little bit of intentionality around it so that I try to fit in what I can. But yeah, no, it can be hard. And like sometimes I show up to the competition and I'm like, oh gosh, like all these people around me like just get to practice all day.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily have that possibility. So
Totally.
yeah.
Man, I have so many thoughts on this, but I'm
Mhm.
one thing that as you're talking, it reminded me that I have been consistently just like shocked at how you and I can do something like this and ask an expert or a pony club study session. And then before I have time to like stumble out of my office and like do anything else productive, you've posted a photo on your next horse. Like you are just like one thing to the other, being so efficient with it. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to like have a little bit of efficiency between these shifts. But as like when that happens, it of course like occurs to me like this is how you have to be if you have all of these things together or all of these things that you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
at the same
So
time.
my partner makes fun of me that like if I have a spare 15 minutes, I'll like quickly study or something, or
Oh
I
my
like quickly do
gosh.
something, and she's like, "What? You could just, like, relax for 15 minutes?" It's like, "No, I have to sort of do everything," and I mean, yes, it allows me to get things done, but it also kinda drives me a bit nuts, so I think, like, for this month when I'm not working or in school, like, I am trying to sort of just take a minute and just, like, rest a little bit and whatever and make some plans and things like that but not sort of run myself into the ground too much. So but yeah, I totally get the kind of adult amateur struggle of trying to when you're stressed at work or whether it's school or work, like getting on the horse and then having all this like pent up, stress and everything. And for the most part, for me, the horses are like such a big stress reliever. That's why, like, I just go out and jump on the next horse or whatever. Um, but when you're preparing for a big competition, if you've got external stressors and you're kind of stressed by like, maybe the horse doesn't feel great or like maybe it's not jumping as well as you want or you had like you had like a problem when you were schooling or something and then you're like worried about that and like why that's happening and then nothing seems to be going right. Like, yeah, it certainly happens for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Um, that's it's interesting that you'll fit in like 15 minutes of studying and also like you mentioned your partner's like you could relax. Like kudos kudos to you for saying yes to things like this, like helping other people when like I'm sure that time with your partner is so precious if there's possibly like free time because you're both just like in these really intense periods, So
Yeah.
um
Well, she's a resident, so I rarely see her.
yeah. she she couldn't hang out anyways. I want to read a question from Courtney that's along these lines in case
Sure.
there's anything additional that you want to add kind of on this topic. And also before I read it, I'll tell people that we did an Ask an Expert episode with Emma that you can look up called I think it's called Navigating Riding as an Amateur. So you could search the word navigating or search Ema Klugman, you'll see it come up. But really, we spend like an hour going through the like juggling different things and the mindset work of it. So you might find that interesting if this topic is of interest to you. Courtney's question is she said it's probably the age old question, but how do you manage your time for riding a full time job, a class load, exercise, cooking for yourself, providing enough attention to your significant other? Um, and then Courtney said, I feel like Emma has mastered it at the upper levels, but I'm struggling to figure out how to fit it all in 24 hours.
Yeah. I don't profess to have mastered it for sure. I think if you think that it's a mirage. But I mean, I do plan out, day by day, week by week. I think I've gotten quite good at saying no to stuff. Like if somebody wants me to drive 45 minutes to teach them a lesson and it's just one person, like I'm not going to do that anymore. Like it's just not worth the hour and a half plus, so two and a half hours of, and then making $80 from it or something. So I make sure that I'm not spending my time doing things that, um, you know, I might find rewarding, but just like aren't worth the sort of time cost to me. And so I make sure to say no to those things. And then I just make sure to prioritize. Like, I think, for example, in law school, like sometimes I don't get to all the readings of all the cases, but I kind of know like which classes are maybe the more important ones or which classes like I don't understand as well. And so I like prioritize those over others. Or the timing works out fairly well for me in the fall because my finals are usually like the first week in December, and the eventing season is largely over by like beginning of November or maybe mid-November for like that last 3-day event. So I basically like know that I'm going to be behind because of all the 3-day events and craziness of the fall season, but I like can trust myself that in the like 3 weeks then before finals I can just really kind of buckle down and basically like I kind of say, "Bye, horses, like, you're just gonna be in the paddock for a while. I'm gonna, like, be a law student now." And so, I just kind of, like I'm at peace with, that kind of scheduling, and I think, like, my first year of law school, I was super nervous about, like, being able to balance it, and now going into my 3rd one, I think I kind of have it sorted in terms of how to do it. But yeah, I think it's really important to, like, take time to, have dinner with your partner, like, watch a movie, like, just relax a little bit as well. I'm not a great cook, but I do cook dinner a lot of the time. And, just like unwind a little bit at the end of a long day, even though, some days I am like riding until 9 o'clock at night, but I try to like also just be a normal person a little bit so that keep everything a little bit together too.
And are those like the cooking and disconnecting from work or horses to watch a movie and just relax, are those ways that you kind of get ahead of reaching burnout, or are there other things that you do to specifically like avoid reaching that threshold?
Yeah, no, I think those things do help. Because I think also like when you can do something that's like somewhat mindless, honestly, I spend a lot of time driving because I like have to commute to the barn where the horses are, but also like to school and or to the office. And I actually don't mind driving because it's time where I can just like put music on or like put a podcast on and just kind of sit there and drive. And like I know my drive, I hate traffic. So like, if there's traffic, it like kind of stresses me out. But if I'm just like doing my normal, 45 minutes, I just kind of zip along. I'm in my like tiny little Fiat car and just like take a bit of time to just, like be a bit chill. So yeah, I think as far as avoiding burnout, I mean, I think for me, like the horses are such a source of happiness in many ways that it's it may happen, but I don't think that horses are going to be the thing to burn me out. I think probably the law will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a good point, that even though the horses are like a very like demanding part of your life in terms of your resources, like emotional, time, financial, like
Mhm.
all of the things, that they are still a source of centering you and like being a source of positivity. Do you have any I would be remiss if I didn't ask if you have any podcasts or audiobook recommendations since you're in the car. And I love that you mentioned you have Fiat because now I like that, knowing that.
Yeah, little Italian car. I listened to this audiobook, it was a few months ago now. One of my best friends recommended it to me called Anxious People. And it sounds like kind of a weird title for a book, but it's basically this like hostage situation novel. And it's hilarious. It's really funny. Like I was laughing out loud in the car listening to it. That would be probably my number one recommendation right now. But yeah, I try to listen to interesting things. And honestly, like I'm often listening to horse things, right? Like, what Red IQ produces, other sort of equestrian podcasts and things like that. And I'm often like watching, Horse and Country or Clip My Horse or something like watching other competitions. So when I turn off, sometimes I'm still like, doing horse research.
Totally.
What is it like to ride at Aachen or at Burley and things like that. But yeah, it's entertainment too.
Totally. There's a couple of times you've texted me about Ride IQ podcasts, and I just feel so flattered to have you listen to them.
Oh yeah, you're awesome. Yeah, the mastermind, is that what it's called?
Yeah, it just came out today.
Is I only got halfway through it, but I was listening to it when I was riding a couple of horses, and yeah, I almost like couldn't concentrate on what I was doing. It was really, really deep stuff. So pretty cool.
Totally. For anybody who hasn't listened to that yet, I mean, I'm just a super fan of the concept and the conversations. I've listened to like the first episode now today, I listened to for the third time. John Holling is one of the guests on that, and he called me during it, and Sinead Halpin Maynard texted me during it. Everyone's just like has feelings about this format, which it's a mindset workshop with top equestrians and really like facing what challenges they have and fears they have, and what their beliefs are. And it's just so amazing to have people speak so candidly about that. So yeah, I was very flattered to hear Emma had started that podcast, and it made me want to have a second season already and have Emma be a guest on it. So maybe that will be able to happen. We have a few more questions from members that we'll get to first, and then I'll feed my own curiosity if we have time. So Sarah has a question that she put on Facebook. She said, how do you measure the scope of a horse? My mare is successfully going training level, but how do I know that she has enough scope for prelim? For instance, I have confidence she would go out and jump what I pointed her at, but how do I know when she's pushing her limits for me?
So I think this is a great question, and it's one that is sometimes a little bit hard to answer. So to me, scope is defined as the ability to jump high and wide, right? It's the horse's kind of natural capacity to clear a big jump, and some horses have a lot of scope, and some horses don't. I will actually admit that Bendigo doesn't actually have a huge amount of scope, but he had a lot of heart, or he has a lot of heart. And that is sort of what got him over, some very, very big jumps, or at least they look very big to me. So in terms of your question, I think it's a really interesting threshold, that jump from training to prelim. Honestly, most horses can jump training level. It's a meter. Some horses have sort of physical limitations that mean they can't jump a meter, but most horses like physically have the capacity, the scope to jump a meter if they're, trained correctly and they're competent enough. Some horses are, just dressage horses, and they're like, oh, I can't jump over a whale on the ground. But for the most part, like your average horse, whether it's a thoroughbred or a warm blood or a draft cross, they can probably do at training level. That is not the case, in my opinion, for prelim. I think you have to have a different type of athlete, or not a different type, but you have to have a different kind of level of athlete to be at that level. And so how do you figure that out, right? Sometimes it's hard to do. The big thing to me would be to test it in the show jumping arena first, and to test it at home, right? So don't just kind of go around training level, school training level, and then just like enter a prelim and, sort of see how it goes, right? Sink or swim. Like, you don't want to do that to yourself or your horse. And I'm not suggesting that you would. I think the fact that you've written this question means that you're thinking about it. But I think testing it in the show jumping is smart, because those jumps fall down. And so if your horse, can't jump that big, or has trouble or misreads something, you're very unlikely to have, a bad accident because of the fact that the show jump rails fall down. So I'd say that, and I'd say it's not the type of thing where you need to sort of just jack the fences up one day and sort of see if your horse can do it. You should kind of do it gradually over time. I trained a lot in the show jumping, or in all three phases, but certainly a lot in the show jumping with Marilyn Little, and we would take, even relatively young horses, maybe 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, who were either going to be eventers or going to be show jumpers, and we would just jump one fence sometimes in a show jump school, like literally one jump the whole school, and we would just practice getting exactly the right canter, exactly the right turn, and then either use kind of V rails or a landing rail or a placing pole, something like that to sort of help the horse's technique. And on some of the horses that we're training for the big classes, that one jump would end up being a meter 50 jump, right? And I was just kind of like hanging on there because I was often the test dummy. But that's the sort of thing where if your horse can jump one jump well like that and gives you a good feeling, then you can probably train them and give them the experience to kind of get comfortable doing it over a course of jumps. But some of them also have to sort of learn to refine their technique. It might be that they have a lot of scope, but they've been kind of like bopping around training level and just kind of, not being straight when they jump or kind of running at the jumps or whatever it may be. And so they haven't really like had to confirm their style yet. And in order to get to like the higher levels, you need them to be a bit more consistent in their style. So I'd train over show jumps first and sort of see how that goes. And I think it goes without saying, like, ask your coach too. Like, what do you think? Is this a prelim horse? Would you take this horse prelim? I've taught people sometimes who say, like, I'm moving up to prelim. And I've thought in my head, I would not take that horse prelim. Like, and, I would tell them that, or, in a clinic situation, like, you don't know the person super well. So it's a little bit tricky. But if the upper level rider is saying, I wouldn't do it, then it's probably the case that you shouldn't either. And you have to remember there's the modified level now too, which is awesome. I have a student who, actually the one who rides Bendigo, who's been spending this year kind of getting her feet wet at the modified level, and it's been great. And like, sure, I mean, before she would have had to kind of start going prelim, or she probably would have spent a bit more time at training and then done prelim, and that would have been a bigger leap. But now she can spend, however long it takes. Obviously, Ben kind of knows what he's doing, but she has another horse too that's, newer to eventing, and she can kind of get that horse situated and used to it. So those would be my main tips. I think thinking about whether the horse has scope is super important, because you can avoid some problems down the road if you realize, like, maybe this horse doesn't really have the most natural ability. And pushing the horse beyond its natural limits is, I think, one of the worst things we can do as riders. I think it can make the rider feel like they can't ride. It can make the horse feel like, they aren't doing the right job, that, they're in a situation that they don't like. And it can make the horse go sour too. Like, if you try to move the horse up to prelim and doesn't really have the ability, it might not even want to go training level again, because it might really lose its confidence. And so you have to be a little bit careful. Now, with that being said, like, my late and great coach, Packy McGaughan, told me every time we moved Bendigo up a level, like, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do it, right? Like, when I went from prelim to intermediate, he's like, I'm not sure he's going to be able to do it. And then intermediate to advanced, the same thing. But he, I think, knew that the horse had heart, so he kind of he trained me to do it. And we'd of course jumped big enough jumps in the show jumping and schooled and stuff. And so, then the horse would go out there and grow wings a little bit. So
Totally.
often they surprise you, but it's important to really assess the situation before you jump into competition.
And when I was competing, modified was not a level. I don't know if you probably know. Is modified prelim show jumping and the rest is the same?
No, it's only 3'5" show jumping. So it's dead in the middle of training and prelim. And the cross country is also 3'5".
Okay.
Cross country. Yeah. So some venues that don't have the resources yet to like buy a whole new set of cross country jumps will use like some small prelim jumps and some big training level jumps and sort of like make a mock modified course, which is like
cool.
Kind of, it lets you get it done, which is nice. It's like you would prefer them to like have all different jumps for modified, and a lot of venues really have put a lot of money into it, which is awesome. But they also need the reassurance that people are going to enter that level too, so that they can justify spending the money on it. But yeah, I mean, modified is great. Like, I was skeptical at first of the level because I was like, oh, that's silly. Like, we should just be able to get to prelim. Like, toughen up a bit. And now I'm like, I'm not going to ever move a young horse straight from training to prelim. Like, I'm always going to do not modified. It's so much like more gradual over progression for them.
Totally.
Yeah.
That is something that I've learned through experiencing change myself too. Like the change is just hard and it's so like it's human nature to be skeptical, but
Mhm.
I try to tell myself like take a beat before having an opinion because just the next week might think something different and
Exactly.
more informed. One thing that you said in that response was about like talk to your coach about it. And it is a reminder to me just what a gift a like genuine or forthcoming coach that you can really trust is. Like sometimes either you don't have access to that person who has a level of expertise or there's dynamics that make it hard to be as candid like you were explaining like not knowing someone well enough in a clinic to really like
Right.
have an opinion but not have an opinion but like share that at that
Yeah.
point with limited exposure but it really is such a gift to have someone who will just like give it to you straight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think it also goes to the point that you really wanna have a coach that has a lot of experience. Like, if they've only ever taken 1 horse prelim, then their, like, data point for that question that you're asking them is, like, literally that 1 horse that they've taken
Mhm.
prelim. But if you have a coach that's taken a dozen horses prelim, they, like, have a sense that, okay, like, maybe a horse who has, like, a shorter step and, isn't, like, the most naturally talented jumper, but, like, has the kind of willpower to get over the jumps, like, was fine at prelim. And if your horse is a little similar to that, they can kind of I mean, I think, like, almost all horse training is kind of about analogies, right? Like, this horse is a little bit like this horse, and what do we do with that horse to, like, bring it along the right way or whatever it may be. So, if your trainer has experience, that's great, and I think there's tons and tons of people who ride with folks that have hardly gone above the level that they're going, and I think it's, frankly, a little bit dangerous, and sometimes you don't have a choice, and so you kinda do the best that you can, but even if that's true, like, in your area for an eventing trainer, go and show jump with a show jumping trainer, right? And say, like, "You think this horse can do the meter 10s or the meter 15s?" Really, like, for a prelim horse, you want it to be kinda comfortable doing the meter 15s and show jumping, right? Because like, the brush on cross country is a bit bigger than that, and, like, if they're like, "Whoa," like, okay, maybe the horse like naturally can do it, but you need like 6 months of really honing in on your technique and getting your eye better, etc. Then that's like super useful. You'd rather take a bit more time before you move up and get all those ducks in a row than kind of jump in and feel like, it's hard to even tread water.
That's a really great piece of advice. But if you don't have the like not top level, but like the eventers or whatever your discipline is, that level of coach that you're looking for in your area, that there's this whole other group of coaches in disciplines that could help you depending on what you're facing. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's a good tip.
And also you might face the phenomenon that is like people around you who may not know a ton, but who are your friends and your, people you ride with saying like, "Oh yeah, he looks super athletic. He can do prelim." And you don't have to take their word at face value. You can really think about it more critically. And I think there's a lot of peer pressure around, moving up, especially among I think kids and young people. Um, and yeah, it's great to move up the levels, but also like you can go training level and like try to be the best training level, horse in your state and horse rider pair. And that is an awesome accomplishment too.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with that. We have another question, also from Sarah. Sarah has great questions, and there's a comment from Courtney saying these are my same things that I would like answered. So it's
Oh,
coming. It's really a group effort here now. Um,
perfect.
is there a way to instill bravery in spooky horses? How do you teach the event horse to become brave?
Oh, this is a great question. So my personal preference is a spooky horse. I love a spooky horse, especially a horse that will like spook at the jump because I feel like it makes them a little more careful. I think a horse that has like zero spook, that's just kind of trotting along and like hardly notices their surroundings, um, doesn't necessarily have like top level potential usually because they're not kind of like sharp enough in their brain. But it can be super annoying, especially when they're a young horse, when they're spooky. So I'll just tell a quick story and then I'll talk about sort of how to deal with it. My first event with Bronte Beach, who's now done, 3, 4-star longs and, Nations Cup, all the things, um, was beginner novice. I think it was beginner novice, or maybe it was novice. I remember entering her in novice. She was 5. She was jumping like meter courses at home. I was like, she can do novice. She'll be fine. And I started the cross country. She was winning the event on like a 25 or something like that. It was like our local pony club event. And I got like halfway around the course, and the whole time she was jumping the jumps, but she was like looking at the jump judges. Like her eye was on them like the whole time up to the jump, over the jump, and then she would land and keep looking at them. Like she was completely distracted the whole time. And we were coming up to this, like, I remember it like it was yesterday, right? This is like 5 or 6 years ago because it was so embarrassing. Coming up to this like tiny little, like light brown, um, kind of rail jump. And I think it was kind of near the water, but it wasn't even like associated with the water. And there was someone there who was sitting in, I think they had like a tent over them, the jump judge, to like stay in the shade. And she just spooked so hard at it and started running sideways. And she basically ran sideways all the way up to the jump. And I was still trying to like get her to jump it. And I fell off. It was so embarrassing. Like it was the worst thing. And like, this horse that had so much potential and scope and all the things. And it was just like horrible. And I had actually fallen off at Bromont the week before. So it was like a terrible couple of weeks. And but now that horse is like one of the bravest horses I have in the barn. And the trick to it was actually just getting her to focus on the job. And once the jumps became interesting enough to her to like keep her attention, all those other things kind of fell away. And so I liken it to the horse sort of learning like what their job is and learning to like it and think, oh, when we go in the start box, we get to like hunt for this jump and then hunt for the next jump. And one thing that I try to teach my horses is they should always be looking for the next thing, right? As soon as they land from a jump, they should be like hunting in the distance to like what the next jump is. When they're babies, they don't do that at all. Like I've had one horse, the wildflower horse, who like did that naturally, but it's super rare. They usually land from the jump and they're like, "Oh, I did a jump." Like then they look at the ground, right? Like they're not thinking ahead. And so you have to teach that to them. A lot of it is experience. Like if you have a spooky horse, don't be scared about taking it to a show. Maybe take it to like an unrecognized event, but like show that horse and like teach the horse. They go out on the course, they've got to go over all the jumps, they've got to, do it in a timely fashion when you ask, they can't be distracted by things. And in terms of dealing with the spook itself, my old coach Packy had a pretty funny like analogy for it as well, which is when a horse is spooking at something, you as the rider should be like a traffic conductor and just be like, nothing to see here. Keep moving along, like nothing to see. And just so basically don't show I'm of the opinion, and he was too, like don't show them the thing and like make them be dramatic about it. Like just bend them away from it, like make them look at what they're supposed to look at, and then they'll kind of learn that that's what they're supposed to do. They've got to develop kind of like more of a tunnel vision, especially for the cross country. So it's hard, and you'll never get rid of all the spook in a horse, which is totally fine. Redfern is super spooky, and if there's like a flower pot or a like how sometimes in show jumping arenas they'll have like a little decorative thing that's like not part of a jump, but you'll just have to like go around it or inside it when you're approaching something. She will always spook at those, like without fail. And so I just have to be like ready for it because I know that I'm going to be like 6 feet to the left or the right of wherever I was. And it's fine. It's like who she is. I'm not going to change her. And as long as she's spooking you know, not too dramatically, that doesn't mean we can't get to the next jump. It's okay with me.
Yeah. I really like hearing you describe that. Like, this is not a reason to get in a fight or be upset with your horse, and there's ways to make it less dramatic versus more dramatic. And more than anything, something that I see in your horses is like you have lit that fire inside of them of like wanting to be part of this. And I think there's an advantage of having something really exciting, like being able to move up the level so that just like, Ben's lion heart comes out. But it's like you can tell that they like have that job to do, and that might be maybe more difficult at like beginner novice. but
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's exercises you can do that makes them like sharp and entertained.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like spooking often goes hand in hand with the horse not being in front of the leg enough. So if your horse is kind of sucking back and they're spooking at stuff, and like both they're not going forward and they're kind of going from side to side, then that's where you can run into issues. So I'd say if you're having issues with that, like on course, but even like schooling or even like just hacking out, make sure to get that horse right in front of your leg, give them a tap behind your leg or something like that, and kind of drive them out in front of you. Even if it means like they come off the bit or they like go too fast for a second or whatever, just to be like, come on, get up there. Like when you ride cross country, you shouldn't feel like you're leading the horse with you. You should feel like the horse is taking you. They should be taking you around the course, like not like that you're, you know, hanging on for dear life like on skis, but you need to feel like the horse is taking you along. And if they're not taking you, you've got to like make them take you, like that's one thing Marilyn always said to me, like if the horse is spooking and they're empty in the bridle, like make them take you, like leg to hand connection, like push them up there. And you'd be surprised if you do that sort of enough and make it the default, the horse like begins to realize, okay, like this is the deal. And honestly, like most thoroughbreds just will do that naturally. And it's one of the great things about a thoroughbred. Like they know how to take the bit. They sort of go in front of you and kind of take you along. Now they might, be a bit too strong sometimes, but it's harder to teach the warm bloods, I think, especially the young ones, how to do that. But you can teach them.
Cool. That is a lot to think about for spooky horses. That was really helpful. The next question touches on, you mentioned the babies and how they react to jumping. The next question is along those lines. It's what are some prerequisites to have before you start your young horses over fences? How do you know when they're ready? How do you make sure not to overface them?
That's a great question. So with our young horses, we will sometimes free jump them as 3-year-olds just to sort of see what their form looks like and what kind of scope they seem to have. We'll maybe do that like once or twice over the 3-year-old summer. We might like pop them over a little cross rail when they're 3, but we won't like really jump them. I don't think that 3-year-olds should really jump. I think it's too early for them. In their 4-year-old year, so usually we kind of turn them out over the winter. They go totally feral and grow like 4 inches of hair, and you are like, okay, you look like a goat. But then you bring them in and sort of trim them up a bit, and they start to look like a horse again. And then I'd say when they're 4, and it could be like when they're 5, right? Like Fern really didn't start jumping until she was 6 because she had a baby. So like I'm saying these ages as like reference points, but it's more like where the horse is in their development. Like after they've had about half a year of like basic flat work and hacking as a 3-year-old, then like a spring of kind of basic flat work and hacking, then I would like 2 or 3 months of that, then I would say you can start jumping them generally for like your average horse. I actually like to start jumping them on the line. So I put a lunge line on them and take them either in the arena, like with a jump that has like only one outside standard. So there's like no standard on the inside for the lunge line to get caught on, and just do like a little cavaletti thing or whatever, just to kind of like show them how to jump and not have the rider there to kind of distract them. And then I'll do that over little cross country jumps too, like little, coops or logs or anything like that. And then once they're doing that a couple of times and, you feel like they're getting used to it, maybe you do it like once or twice. You don't have to do it a ton. You hop on them and you build a tiny little cross rail and you point them at a jump and you kind of see what they do. I'm a big believer in trotting jumps for as kind of long as it takes for the horse to get super comfortable. Um, I think one of the biggest lessons that a horse should learn early is that they may not stop. In my book of training, that's like a big thing. The horses isn't to stop, especially over like a little show jump, even if their legs are all, discombobulated or whatever, they've just got to get to the other side. I would rather them kind of whack their legs on the jump and sort of just bumble over it and sort of knock the whole thing down than stop and try to like turn around and go back to the barn, right? Like to me, just getting to the other side is the first thing they learn. And then you kind of start to work on like developing their style and seeing what they can do with it. I like to train them to jump when they're little, almost like they're going to be a working hunter, like super loose, loopy rein, a little bit forward in the position so the horse can sort of put its nose down a little bit and kind of seek the jump. I think that can be a nice way to them kind of teach them to relax when they're jumping. And then, before you know it, they're like popping around little courses and things like that. I think as a rule, generally with a young horse, you want to try to ask them questions you know that they'll say yes to, but you're not going to always know they're going to say yes because if you've never jumped the scary flower box before, at some point you have to point them at it and see what they do. And I think you have to be super unemotional about riding babies to the point where, they do something funny or whatever, you don't react too much. You just kind of turn around, try it again. But you also have to be firm with them because I think those formative kind of little jumping sessions are going to be super important as they progress in their career. So it's super fun. It's one of my favorite things to do is teach a horse how to jump and kind of just see like, wow, like what's their natural instinct? Like, okay, they hit it that time. Like, are they going to come around again and try to, clear it by a mile? Like what's their reaction?
I'm so interested in, and we could do a whole session, we almost did, on developing young horses. But I'm so interested in kind of like the magic sauce because a lot of people work with young horses and not a lot of people have like great success with it necessarily. And you have a program that really like gives them the opportunity to have success if that's, in the cards for them. And I know it's a million ingredients at once, but are there like a couple of things that come to mind that kind of differentiate your program? Maybe it's like your patients or how you pick them initially, or I don't know what it could be, but what comes to mind in that regard?
Um, I mean, I think we are patient with them. I think we try to pick ones that look kind of naturally like they'll be athletes from the beginning. Um, I I would love to educate myself more about breeding because I think I've, tried to think about that and certainly look at bloodlines and things like that, but I don't have a ton of experience with it, so I can't say like all the horses in the barn are kind of different bloodlines. Like it's not like we're, picking horses that are all by the same stallion. Now I'd probably based on a couple of the horses like want to have some more of those babies, but we have all kind of shapes and sizes. Um, you have to remember, yes, I have a few young horses right now, and I'm lucky to have a few horses that are at the top levels, but I've also sold a ton of horses. And so maybe part of my program is that if the horse gets to 6 years old and I realize it's not going to be an advanced horse, I sell it and I make somebody really happy that I have a nicely trained young horse that, you know, can do its stuff. So I think you have to be willing to sort of realize, okay, this horse might not be for this job.
Totally. That is great. It takes a lot of like truthfulness to yourself too, like
Mhm.
acknowledging that. Okay, one final question that I want to make sure we get to. I can't
Sure.
believe we're already at the hour. Krista said, "In the free walk, my horse forges." I thought that was a good thing because it means that she's over tracking and taking big steps, and no judge had said anything before until recently. The judge wrote forging in the free walk. How do I stop this forging? And should I talk to my farrier?
Yes, that's a great question. I actually had one that did this. as like a sales horse, so it wasn't one of my personal horses. I think when they forge in the free walk, and this would be a better question probably for like Lauren Spicer or like a dressage judge or something, because I don't profess to be the expert, is I think it's a symptom of the horse being a little bit out of balance. You do want the horse to have a large overstep. Like that's a great attribute for them to have just naturally in their gaits, but it's also a great sign that they're relaxed and they're swinging in their backs. But if they're literally kind of interfering, and for those maybe who don't know, forging is when the hind foot hits the toe of the front foot as the front foot is leaving the ground, such that it actually usually makes like a fairly loud noise because the two shoes generally hit each other if the horse has 4 shoes on. Whereas an overreach is when the hind toe hits the heel bulb of the front foot, right? Going back to our HB study sessions here, we had somebody explain that super well, so brushed up on it. But so either overreaching or forging means a little bit, if you think about it, the physics of it is that the front legs aren't really getting out of the way in time for the hind legs to come through, right? If the hind legs are always hitting the front legs, that means the front legs aren't moving quick enough. And so I'd say, honestly, like, don't like throw the baby out with the bathwater, in the sense that like if your horse has a good walk, like don't screw with it too much just to try to get rid of the forging, but maybe experiment with like your tempo, like maybe slow it down a little bit and see if it doesn't happen as much, or maybe have a little bit more connection, or maybe not quite so low in the head and neck. Like if your horse really reaches down, maybe its front legs are also a little bit slower to get out of the way. Just experiment a little bit about what happens. Your farrier could trim the horse differently, in terms of the breakover point being different to help it. But sometimes I get nervous about like changing shoeing around because it can affect other things with the horse, and their balance and things like that. So I don't think it's a huge issue, but I think you could play around with your tempo. You can play around a little bit with the frame. Obviously, a free walk is a free walk, so you have to be on a loose rein. You can't keep the horse in a medium walk, but you could maybe like think about having the horse's neck out, more parallel but more horizontal rather than so low, and maybe that would help. But if your horse forging in the free walk is the worst thing that's going wrong in your dressage test, then you're doing pretty well.
Absolutely. Chris, I did not know that could have been like a critical note either. So that's very interesting to learn. And Krista just said, I like that you mentioned the physics of it. I taught middle school science, so I wish I would have thought of that. Thank you.
I don't know that I passed middle school science, so
you guys can work together on that if you need to. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Regrettably, I wish we could start it all again, but fortunately, like I said, I get to learn from you every week these days, which is great. So Emma, thank you again just for spending the time with us and being so willing to teach us the things that you know, because it's just energizing to be learning from you and chatting with you.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun. I love talking horses.
And for anybody who wants more, Emma has a great Conversations with Coaches with Kyle Carter. If you have not listened to that episode of Conversations with Coaches, and lots of great hack chats too, obviously, but I think Conversations with Coaches gets overlooked sometimes. So take a look at that. And Emma, enjoy your month of a little bit slower times.